Welcome everyone to the next episode of the Wheel to Wheel podcast. And in today's episode, we take on the very intriguing topic of the virtual Grand Prix put on by Formula One in the absence of real racing. Here we are at Bahrain. This is the circuit. It is a 3.362 miles track with 15 turns. It is a clockwise track with some heavy braking zones, and this track has 3 DRS zones and a lot of overtaking sections. This is the first event that Formula One has put on with real Formula One drivers taking part in it. Some of the drivers that have signed up are Nicholas Latifi from Williams, Lando Norris from McLaren, Nico Hülkenberg, who was an ex-Formula One driver. This is quite the historic moment for motorsports and for e-racing and esports. I think this is going to be an interesting event to look into just because of the events leading up to it. It was a scramble to put together, but I think they have managed to get some drivers together. There's some Formula One drivers, there's some Formula 2, Formula 3 drivers, and also some people just around the paddock who are popular or big name drivers. So it's going to be very interesting to see. It's not just a professional race in the sense. It's going to be very entertaining, and I'm looking forward to this. I think the commentators leading up to the event did a great job of commentating the sport, and here we are out here for qualifying. It's a 16.5-minute qualifying section, I believe, and it's going to take some getting used to, as some of these drivers have never really driven this as much as some of the professional esports drivers. Now I know there's some guys in here who have just practiced for a couple of days, so they kind of look like as good as I would be if I was out there. Some guys are even missing the corners and kind of getting used to it. It just looks like utter chaos. Qualifying, there was a lot of yellow flags out there. It was kind of hard to kind of watch and keep track of. It wasn't as smooth as a real event. It was hilarious and entertaining. So before we go any further, if you have not watched the stream, click on the link below and go watch it on the Formula One website, because it is entertaining. I would say do not miss this. And so here are my thoughts on qualifying. I thought it was a very interesting session. It was 18 minutes of utter chaos when they came out of the pits. It was interesting because I think when they went out to qualify, they were under the impression they were going to run a 50% race, which is around 28 laps around Bahrain. And so I think that a lot of drivers started on softs, and they did start on softs because they wanted to do a two-stop strategy. But in the end of qualifying, if you haven't seen it, spoiler alert, they cut the race down to 14 laps, and that changes the strategy quite a bit. The other thing was there was a lot of drivers who were struggling out there when qualifying initially started, and I think most of them were the non-Formula One, non-pro drivers. They were kind of flying all over the road, and so there were quite a bit of penalties out there. Even though that said, I think the spread of drivers was pretty close. I think the couple of a second and a half covered a good chunk of the field. So it was very competitive qualifying. It was very entertaining to watch. The commentators did a great job. And Philip Eng was very good. Esteban Gutierrez was, again, really solid as well. So was Latifi, Hülkenberg. Lando Norris had a technical issue. Jimmy Broadbent also had a technical issue, which was interesting to see. Kind of see technical issues come into esports in its inaugural race. I think that's something that could continue to be ironed out. Lando Norris is very quick. We've seen him in some of the other Formula One races, and he potentially could have been top 5, but out of the top 5 in this race, we had 3 Formula One drivers, or people who have driven Formula One cars in real life, which was interesting to see as well. Stoffel Van Dorn kind of struggled a little bit in qualifying. Johnny Herbert was hilarious. The commentators did a great job uh, during qualifying. Unfortunately, Latifi couldn't beat Esteban Gutierrez, and so the grid ended up being Gutierrez on second, Philip Eng on pole position, Guan Yunju and Nicholas Latifi on the second row, and Hulkenberg on the third row. Besides, someone who I thought really impressed was Luca Salvadori. I think as a racer, he was very well done. I think in qualifying to be in top six in this field. The graphics looked great. There was no glitching. The network was strong. The commentating was strong. It was a very entertaining qualifying period, to say the least. I thought one of the drivers in qualifying that was pretty disappointing was Nicholas Hamilton with some sim experience and some real driving experience. I think he struggled to be down in 13th. He was not where I expected him to be necessarily. Liam Payne was very slow. So everyone, here we go. If you haven't seen the race, go watch it on the link below on the Formula One website. Otherwise, the lights go green and the commentators wait patiently for the cars to start moving. I think the most important thing is that the commentators could not predict when the game would actually start going. I thought it was hilarious because in reality, in real life, it's all timed up. But in this virtual Grand Prix, the game has its own leg. So it was absolutely no way for the commentators to predict. I thought they did a great job to cover it off, but it was, for me, one of the initial highlights of this first lap. That does not end there. First lap, before you get to the end of the straight, cars are flying left and right. Nico Hulkenberg is in the wall straight away, takes out a a Ferrari with him. Cars are going all over the place. Carbon fiber bits everywhere. But the best part is that the commentators do a great job of making comedy of Johnny Herbert before the race and how he would reach legendary status if he won the race. And Johnny Herbert does not disappoint into the first corner, cuts it completely, drives in front of everyone else, and at the end of the second corner is leading the race. Johnny Herbert, who started from 15th spot, is winning the race by cutting the corner. I thought that was absolutely hilarious. I was in stitches laughing because it was just so comical. In the back, cars were going left and right. Esteban Gutierrez, who started on the front pack, was in the wall. We already had a retirement from another Alfa Romeo, and Nicholas Latifi was in the wall. Stoffel Van Dorn was in the wall. Everybody was all over the place, and Lando Norris was nowhere to be found. He didn't take the start, but somehow he was in the top 10 because an AI was driving for him, and he was doing amazing. It's just kind of hilarious to see. Not to say, like, the first 4 laps was utter chaos. Everyone was crashing. Everyone was trying to pass each other. And then Sandekist hits his teammate, Luca Salvadori, who qualified in 6th spot. And I thought that was, absolutely comical because in motorsports, you would lose your mind if you hit your teammate. But when it's a YouTuber hitting another guy virtually, you can't just help but laugh. Everybody else kind of made it through, but it was absolute carnage. Lando Norris at one point was up to 5th place. People were losing bumpers and people were touching and hitting each other. It was just hilarious. But Norris Bot was fast. Jimmy Broadbent was very quick, started at the back, but ended up making his way all the way up the grid, up to top 5, even top 3 at some point. Guan Yanju was very fast as well. He came in to take on Philip Eng and just drove away. Very well driven. But nothing can be said because it was absolutely amazing to watch Nico Hulkenberg battle it out today out there. Also, the other thing that happened in the race was the last few laps were absolutely crazy with the position changes coming in, with Stoffel Van Dorn taking second place from Philip Eng, last minute charge. I thought Van Dorn had a great race. I think it's kind of underestimated how good of a race he had after he started in 11th place in qualifying. So I thought it was a great race by him. Lando Norris comes back. Lando Bot just left him around fourth, fifth place, and then the real Lando Norris, stood up and started driving like a maniac, really fast, and caught up to Jimmy Broadbent. Jimmy Broadbent lost a little bit on one of the turns, and Lando Norris was able to get past him. But in the end, going into the last two corners, they had big contact. I think Lando Norris turned into him a little bit. It's kind of unfortunate, but Lando Norris ends up in fifth and Jimmy Broadbent in fourth. So your final standings end up being Guan Yonju, Stoffel Van Dorn, Philip Eng, Jimmy Broadbent, Lando Norris, Nicholas Latifi, and Luca Salvadori, who had an impressive drive for not being a Formula One driver and only 2.8 seconds behind Latifi. Some of the other battles for me were Dino Beganovic, about 5 seconds in front of Hulkenberg. Hulkenberg drove a phenomenal, entertaining race. I would love to have him back. He's a great thing to watch. Esteban Gutierrez just under a second behind him. Johnny Herbert, unfortunately, is not a legend, and he was only in 13th. Nicholas Hamilton with a very disappointing race, I'd say. Ian Poulter, Chris Hoy, and Liam Payne rounding out the remainder of the runners in the field. This was the first of its kind, and I thought it was fantastic. I would love to see more Formula One drivers out, more professional racers out. I think it's very clear to see that these drivers who have experience and are very good sim racers and professional drivers are on a different level than some of the guys who've never done it before. It was very entertaining. I loved it. Besides the technical issues, I think once you get that sorted, a longer session, more smoother session with more replays, and I think this would be an absolute joy to watch. And I had a lot of fun watching this. I would watch next week's episode as well, and yeah, it was super fun. I think one of the interesting points that one of the commentators mentioned is that the aids. The number of aids you have out there really changes how hard the game can be. So I think some of the drivers are running with ABS, some of them were running without ABS, some of them were driving with traction control and different levels of it. So it was super entertaining and super accessible for people to jump in and drive. Another interesting concept that somebody brought up was, even putting one real F1 championship point on the line and asking these drivers to go out and drive, I think might invite some more Formula One drivers. I know there's some chatter about bringing in the Williams driver, George Russell, and also Alex Albon from Red Bull. Maybe some of the other drivers like Verstappen and Bottas or Leclerc might even join in the future. We'll see how it goes. One of the things I saw but I didn't really enjoy was a lot of contact from these drivers trying to make passes. I think we saw that from Stoffel Van Dorn and Jimmy Broadbent in the end there. But more respect need to be given in the gaming world. I know it's just a game, but I think some of these drivers need to learn to control their cars a little bit better. But I think the quality of racing was good. I think we're only going to see it get better. I thought Philip Eng made a lot of contact on Johnny Herbert making a pass. I know Herbert shouldn't have been there on the first lap, but still, he had some contact going into turn 13. I didn't think that was necessary, but I thought it was kind of full circle when Stoffel Van Dorn did the same thing to him to lose his second place. But I thought it was fair. I think you dish it out, you get it back. That's just the way it goes. Another thing I really enjoyed watching was Esteban Gutierrez really drive a recovery drive and duke it out so well with Nico Hulkenberg. They were driving wheel to wheel, absolutely inches beside each other, and they had tons of respect and tons of space. I know Hulkenberg and Dino Beganovic have been battling since the beginning of the race, and so they had a massive battle as well, and using DRS to get past each other. It was absolutely entertaining to watch. As the race goes on, the commentators do a great job of keeping us entertained and keeping up with us with the race. I think one of the things that one of the takeaways for me is that since it's a live stream, it's hard to do cutaways and replays. So I think in the future somehow they'll have to manage that, because it was very hard to keep track of the event and what all the comical stuff that was happening, because there was a lot of contact on this race. Overall, a great event. If we can clean up the first lap mess, I think it would have been a very fun race, because I think we would have seen the likes of Hulkenberg and Esteban Gutierrez further up the grid. But nonetheless, it was very entertaining. For me, the driver of the day was Stoffel Van Dorn, who started in 11th place and ended up second. It was a great drive. I think another, I guess, runner-up to the driver of the day would be Jimmy Broadbent, because I think starting at the back of the grid to finish the race in 4th place is no easy feat, and he fought Lando Norris quite hard and quite fair. So it was an entertaining race to see. Great drive by both these drivers, and I think I'm excited to see what is going to happen in the future with these series. Check it out. Super fun. That's all I had for this episode, folks. Stay tuned to our channel and let us know what you think in the comments.